My parents forced me to give up my inheritance to my prodigy younger brother, but now they don't know I'm their boss's boss. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I just wanted it to be as motivation to somebody one day. I'm Alex, 28M, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to secretly becoming one of the most successful people in our entire extended family. All while my parents and brother think I'm barely making ends meet as a junior accountant. Before I dive into the recent events that prompted this post, I need to share the full story of growing up in the shadow of a prodigy, and how that shadow shaped everything that followed. Let me take you back to where it all began, back to a childhood where success was measured in dollar signs and social connections. I grew up in what looked like the perfect upper-middle-class family from the outside. My father, Richard, was a successful investment banker, and my mother, Diana, came from old money and managed our family's real estate investments. Then there was my younger brother, Marcus, 25M, the chosen one, the brilliant financial prodigy who could supposedly do no wrong. From the moment Marcus could talk, he was being groomed to take over both the family business and my father's position at the bank. He had a natural charm that made people gravitate toward him, and my parents saw him as their ticket to building a lasting family dynasty. The problem? They already had me, the quiet, tech-obsessed firstborn who preferred coding to networking at country club events. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a failure by any normal standards. I maintained straight A's throughout school, created several successful apps by age 16, and even got accepted into Stanford's computer science program. But in our family's world of high finance and old money connections, my achievements might as well have been a child's crayon drawings on the refrigerator. My earliest memory of feeling less than was at our annual family Christmas gathering when I was 7. I had just won the state-level science fair with a computer program I'd written, my first real coding project. While I was excitedly trying to show my parents, Marcus, then 4, was charming our father's business partners by reciting stock market terms he'd memorized. Everyone cooed over how he was a natural businessman in the making. My science fair trophy gathered dust in the garage while Marcus's first piggy bank got a place of honor on our father's desk. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I was 12, I developed a simple app to help my classmates organize their study schedules. It spread through the school like wildfire, and a local tech blog even wrote about it. My parents' response? "That's nice, honey, but wouldn't your time be better spent at the junior investment club with Marcus?" Meanwhile, Marcus was being featured in the local paper for being the youngest member of the Youth Financial Advisory Board, a position our father's connections had secured for him. High school was when the divide became painfully obvious. While I was staying up late teaching myself advanced programming languages and building more sophisticated applications, my parents were grooming Marcus for his future finance career. They hired personal coaches to teach him networking skills, got him internships at prestigious firms, and made sure he was invited to all the right social events. I was told these opportunities wouldn't be a good fit for my hobby interests. The real turning point came during my grandfather's last years. My grandfather, unlike my parents, saw potential in my interest in technology. He was an old-school industrialist who believed in diversifying family interests. Before he passed away, he had planned to split his considerable fortune between Marcus and me, with my portion specifically earmarked for technology investments. My grandfather was the only one who truly understood my passion for technology. He'd made his fortune by recognizing and investing in emerging industries during the post-war boom, and he saw the same pioneer spirit in my interest in coding. During my last 2 years of high school, I would spend every Sunday afternoon in his study, showing him my latest projects on my laptop, while he shared stories about building his business empire from scratch. "The future isn't in doing things the way they've always been done," he would tell me, his eyes twinkling with the same excitement I felt when solving a particularly challenging coding problem. "It's in seeing what others can't see yet." He kept a folder of articles about emerging tech companies, and we would discuss them for hours, debating their potential impact on various industries. The last time I saw him, just 3 weeks before he passed, he was already quite ill, but his mind was sharp as ever. "Alex," he said, holding my hand with surprising strength, "don't let anyone tell you that understanding technology is less valuable than understanding money. In the future, they'll be one and the same." He then told me about his plan to split his fortune, ensuring I would have the resources to pursue my tech ventures. This threw my parents into a panic. They couldn't fathom wasting half the family fortune on what they saw as risky tech ventures when it could all go to Marcus's sure thing financial career. The manipulation started subtle, but grew increasingly aggressive. They began a campaign to convince me that I wasn't ready for such responsibility, that I didn't understand the business world like Marcus did, that I would inevitably lose everything if I tried to manage my inheritance. The pressure was relentless. Family dinners became interrogations about my backup plan. If tech didn't work out, my mother would leave financial articles about failed tech startups on my desk. My father took every opportunity to showcase Marcus's financial acumen while dismissing my technical achievements. Even Marcus got in on it, constantly reminding me how he could help manage my portion of the inheritance since I didn't understand money. One particularly painful memory stands out. It was during my senior year of high school, just after I'd received my acceptance to Stanford. Instead of celebration, dinner that night turned into another lecture about practical career choices. My mother had invited several family friends, all from banking or finance backgrounds, and orchestrated what was essentially an intervention disguised as a career guidance session. Stanford's computer science program is interesting, one of my father's colleagues said with barely concealed disdain. But have you considered transferring to their business school after a year? That's where the real opportunities are. Another chimed in with a story about his nephew who'd wasted 5 years at a failed tech startup before finally seeing sense and joining a traditional bank. Meanwhile, Marcus sat there smugly as they praised his summer internship at a prestigious investment firm. Your brother really understands how the real world works, my mother said pointedly. He's already building the connections that will secure his future. I remember gripping my fork so hard my knuckles turned white, trying not to show how much their words hurt. The campaign to protect me from myself extended beyond our immediate family. Aunts, uncles, and family friends would corner me at every social gathering, armed with cautionary tales about failed tech entrepreneurs and statistics about startup failure rates. My mother even enlisted my girlfriend's parents to talk sense into me, suggesting that a stable career in finance would make me a better potential husband in the future. The constant pressure began to take its toll. I started having anxiety attacks before family gatherings, knowing they would turn into interrogations about my future. My grades never slipped, but I found myself coding late into the night, not just because I loved it, but because it was the only time I felt free from their judgment. The only refuge I had was my weekly visits to my grandfather, who continued to encourage my passion for technology until his passing. The final straw came when they orchestrated a family intervention, complete with concerned aunts and uncles, all trying to convince me that giving up my inheritance to Marcus was the responsible thing to do. They painted a picture of impending disaster if I received my share, suggesting I would destroy not just my portion but potentially drag Marcus down with me if any joint ventures went wrong. I was 21, exhausted from fighting, and about to start my senior year at Stanford. So I did something that would change everything. I agreed to sign away my inheritance rights to Marcus, but with my own secret plan in motion. What my family didn't know was that I had already secured a prestigious internship at a leading tech venture capital firm. More importantly, I had been developing an AI-driven financial analysis platform in my spare time, something that could revolutionize how investment decisions were made. The prototype had already caught the attention of several Silicon Valley veterans. The idea for the platform was born from pain. During my sophomore year at Stanford, I hit a low point. My parents had cut off my allowance, hoping to teach me responsibility after I refused to switch to a business major. I was surviving on ramen noodles and working part-time at the university's IT department when I noticed something interesting. The financial models the university's endowment fund used were incredibly outdated and inefficient. Late one night, while fixing a server crash in the finance department, I found myself looking through their investment analysis software. It was like stepping back in time. Clunky interfaces, manual data entry, and zero machine learning capabilities. That's when it hit me. I could build something better, much better. I started coding every free moment I had. Between classes, during lunch breaks, late into the night. My roommate thought I was crazy, especially when I started talking to my computer at 3 a.m., debugging complex algorithms. But I was obsessed. I knew I was onto something big. The breakthrough came during a hackathon sponsored by a major tech company. I hadn't slept for 48 hours, running on nothing but energy drinks and determination. My hands were shaking as I demonstrated an early version of my platform. It wasn't pretty, but it could analyze market trends and predict investment outcomes with surprising accuracy. One of the judges, a retired hedge fund manager turned VC, pulled me aside afterward. "Kid," he said, "you're either going to revolutionize fintech or get arrested by the SEC. Either way, I want in." That meeting changed everything. He became my first investor and mentor, teaching me how to navigate the complex intersection of finance and technology. More importantly, he taught me how to play the long game. "Your family sees technology as a threat to their way of life," he told me. "So don't fight them. Let them think they've won, while you build something that will make their methods obsolete." I played the part of the responsible son who had seen reason. I signed the papers with a show of reluctance but acceptance. My parents were relieved. Marcus was smugly triumphant, and I was secretly laying the groundwork for my future. After graduation, I took what appeared to be a modest job at a tech startup while living in a small apartment in San Francisco. My family saw this as confirmation that they had made the right decision about the inheritance. Meanwhile, I was working 80-hour weeks, splitting time between my day job and developing my platform. Those early days in San Francisco were both exhilarating and terrifying. My apartment was barely bigger than a closet, in a neighborhood that made my mother cry when she visited once. "This is what happens when you chase pipe dreams," she said, looking at my futon on the floor and the makeshift desk made from stacked milk crates. Marcus just bought a condo in the financial district. What she didn't see was that my tiny apartment had become a command center for something extraordinary. Every wall was covered in whiteboards filled with algorithms and system architectures. My neighbors probably thought I was a conspiracy theorist with all the flowcharts and diagrams. I had 3 monitors running 24/7, testing different versions of my AI models. The electricity bill was insane, but I was too obsessed to care. I lived like a ghost. Ramen noodles and coffee were my main food groups. I would code until I literally couldn't keep my eyes open, crash for a few hours, then start again. My only real breaks were forced ones. When my laptop would overheat from running complex simulations, I'd walk to the corner store for more energy drinks and peanut butter. The turning point came 6 months in, when my platform correctly predicted a major market shift that traditional analysts had missed. It wasn't just luck. My AI had spotted patterns in global trading data that human analysts couldn't possibly process. When I showed the results to my mentor, he just smiled and made some calls. Within a week, I had meetings set up with serious investors. The twist? The modest startup was actually a technology incubator run by one of the most successful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. They didn't just hire me, they were investing in my AI platform. Within 18 months, my technology was being licensed by major financial institutions. By 24, I had founded my own company, Secure AI Analytics, which quickly became a major player in the fintech industry. But success came with its own challenges. I remember the day we got our first major client, a prestigious investment bank that Marcus had been trying to land as a client for months. I had to bite my tongue during our next family video call when he bragged about almost closing a deal with them. If he only knew that the new system his team was struggling to understand was mine. The hardest part wasn't building the company. It was maintaining the illusion of mediocrity. I bought cheap suits for family events while wearing bespoke ones to board meetings. I drove a beat-up Toyota to visit my parents, while my company's parking garage held a collection of luxury cars. I learned to deflect questions about my work with vague answers about doing some programming for a small firm. But I kept all of this hidden from my family. As far as they knew, I was still a small-time programmer living paycheck to paycheck. I maintained the illusion through careful social media management and modest living whenever I visited home. It wasn't even that difficult. They were so focused on Marcus's burgeoning career at our father's bank that they barely paid attention to my life. Living a double life takes its toll, though. There were close calls that still make me break out in cold sweat thinking about them. Like the time my mother decided to surprise visit me at work. I had given them the address of a small tech consulting firm where I'd rented a desk specifically for such occasions. That day, I was actually across town in my real office, negotiating a multimillion-dollar deal. My assistant texted me that my mother was in the building looking for me. I had to make up an excuse about being sick at home, then rush across the city in my Tesla, which I parked 3 blocks away, change into my poor programmer clothes in a coffee shop bathroom, and meet her at my apartment, pretending to have the flu. Or the Christmas party incident. My company had just been featured in Forbes, and I was on the cover, thankfully wearing sunglasses and photographed from an angle that made me less recognizable. Marcus brought the magazine to our family dinner, talking about this brilliant new tech company that was revolutionizing finance. He spent 20 minutes explaining MY technology to me, getting half the details wrong. I had to sit there nodding politely while he butchered the explanation of algorithms I had written. The irony was painful. The hardest moments were when I saw Marcus struggling. Despite his outward success, I could see the cracks forming. At family events, his smile seemed increasingly strained. He would drink a little too much and make cynical comments about the banking industry. Once, I found him alone in our father's study during a holiday party, staring at his reflection in the window with such despair it made my heart ache. But any attempt to talk to him was met with that practiced arrogance our parents had instilled in him. There were times I almost broke and told them everything. Like when my father had a health scare last year. A minor heart attack that he tried to hide from everyone. I visited him in the hospital, and for a moment, seeing him looking vulnerable in that hospital bed, I wanted to tell him that he didn't need to worry about anything, that I could take care of everything. But then he started talking about how fortunate they were that Marcus was successful enough to handle any medical bills. And the moment passed. Marcus, meanwhile, was living the life they had planned for him. He took a fast-track position at our father's bank, drove expensive cars, and became a regular on the young socialite scene. My parents never tired of talking about his latest deals or social connections. They would often call me just to tell me about his achievements, usually with a subtle reminder of how wise I had been to know my limitations with the inheritance. But I saw the toll it was taking on him too. The pressure to maintain the golden boy image was crushing him. He would call me late at night sometimes, usually after a few drinks, almost reaching out for something. Connection? Understanding? But he could never quite break through that wall of competition and resentment our parents had built between us. These calls always ended with him reasserting his superiority, as if remembering his script. Everything changed last month. My company had been quietly acquiring shares in various financial institutions, including the bank where my father and brother worked. Through a series of shell companies and investment vehicles, we had become majority shareholders. The board, impressed by our technology and market performance, agreed to a full merger. The acquisition wasn't just business. It was personal redemption. Every late night I'd spent coding, every family dinner where I'd swallowed my pride, every condescending remark about my cute little computer job had led to this moment. My AI platform had grown beyond anything even I had imagined. It wasn't just analyzing markets, it was reshaping them. The same banks that had once dismissed me as a tech dreamer were now desperate to implement my systems. The week before the merger announcement, I had a private moment that I'll never forget. I went to my grandfather's grave, something I do every year on his birthday. I sat there for hours, telling him everything. My success, the upcoming merger, the years of secrecy. I could almost hear his laugh, imagine him saying, "I told you so," with that twinkle in his eye. I left his favorite scotch by the headstone and promised him that I would use my success to help other young innovators who, like me, saw the future differently. The day after the merger was announced, my father called me in a panic. The bank was going through a major reorganization, and there were rumors of significant management changes. He wanted to know if my tech contacts had any inside information about the new ownership. The irony was incredible. He was basically asking me if I knew anything about my own plans for his company. But the real bombshell dropped yesterday. Marcus, in his arrogance, tried to challenge some of the new management directives. He went around his immediate superiors and attempted to pitch his own restructuring plan directly to the board, actually, to my representatives. His proposal was not just rejected. He was demoted for violating chain of command. I was actually in the building when it happened, in a private office watching the whole thing via video conference. Marcus had swaggered into the boardroom like he owned the place, armed with PowerPoint slides full of outdated methodologies and flawed projections. I remember feeling a complex mix of emotions, embarrassment for him, anger at our parents for pushing him into a role he wasn't ready for, and a weird sort of pride in how far my own technology had come. The presentation was painful to watch. Every slide revealed how out of touch he was with modern financial technology. He was proposing strategies that my AI could prove were obsolete before he even finished explaining them. The my board members, were polite but dismissive. One of them, a veteran trader who'd become one of my closest advisors, actually had to hide a smile behind his hand when Marcus confidently presented a risk assessment model that my system had disproven months ago. When the rejection came, I watched my brother's facade crack for the first time in years. For a moment, he looked like that scared kid who used to sneak into my room late at night, asking for help with his math homework, something our parents never knew about. He had always been good at memorizing facts and figures, but understanding the underlying principles? That was where he struggled, though he'd never admit it. My parents are beside themselves. My mother called me crying about how unfair it was that Marcus was being punished for showing initiative. My father is worried about his own position, as the new management is reviewing all senior leadership. They even suggested I try to get a job at the bank now, since my programming experience might be valuable with the new tech-focused ownership. The conversation with my mother was particularly surreal. Between sobs, she kept saying how the bank didn't understand talent and how Marcus was too innovative for them. I sat in my penthouse office, looking out over San Francisco Bay, listening to her worry about Marcus's car payments and mortgage. She even suggested that I ask Marcus for a loan if I ever needed one, since he's always been so good with money. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. I haven't told them the truth yet. Part of me wants to maintain the charade just to see how this plays out. Another part feels guilty for essentially becoming their boss without their knowledge. But a bigger part of me remembers all the years of dismissal, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. There was this one moment yesterday that really got to me. I was leaving the office late, and I saw Marcus in the parking garage, sitting in his BMW with his head on the steering wheel. For a second, I almost walked over and told him everything. But then I remembered Christmas 2019, when he'd mockingly given me a Programming for Dummies book in front of the entire family, suggesting I might finally learn to do something useful. The memory stopped me in my tracks. Marcus's demotion isn't just about him breaking protocol. His financial projections were fundamentally flawed, and his investment strategies were dangerously outdated. The exact kind of mishaps my AI platform was designed to prevent. In a twist of fate, the inheritance they were so desperate to keep away from my risky tech ventures is now worth less than 1% of my company's value. The situation has taken an unexpected turn. Yesterday, everything came crashing down in the most unexpected way. Remember that TechCrunch profile I mentioned? Well, my cousin Lisa, who apparently follows tech news religiously, recognized me. She didn't immediately tell my parents instead. She sent me a private message on LinkedIn. Holy shit, Alex. I always knew you were smarter than they gave you credit for, but this is absolutely incredible. We met for coffee, and for the first time in years, I could talk to a family member without pretense. Lisa had always been different from the rest of the family. She's a graphic designer who also faced her share of criticism for not following the family-approved career path. She listened to my whole story, occasionally bursting into laughter at the sheer audacity of it all. You know they're going to lose their minds when they find out, she said. But maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. She was right, of course. The truth came out this morning, but not the way I planned. My parents were at a charity gala last night where one of my major investors was being honored. During his speech, he mentioned Secure AI Analytics and its brilliant young CEO, and showed my photo on the big screen. My mother apparently fainted. My father, according to Lisa, who was also there, turned white as a sheet. They showed up at my office first thing this morning. The look on their faces when they were escorted up to the executive floor was something I'll never forget. My mother was still in her gala dress, my father in his tuxedo. They'd apparently been up all night putting the pieces together. I was in the middle of a video conference with our Tokyo office when my assistant buzzed through. "Sir, your parents are here." The formality in her voice must have thrown them. I could see their reflection in my office windows, standing in the doorway, taking in the view of the city from my corner office, the awards on the walls, the multiple screens displaying real-time market data powered by my AI. I ended the call and turned to face them. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then my mother started crying. Not her usual calculated tears, but real, messy sobs. My father just kept opening and closing his mouth, like he couldn't decide where to begin. That's your name on everything," he finally managed to say, gesturing at the company logo on the wall. You're the one who bought the bank." Before I could respond, my mother jumped in with what might be the most unintentionally hilarious thing she's ever said. But you drive a Toyota." The conversation that followed was intense. They oscillated between trying to take credit for my success, "We pushed you to prove yourself," and expressing hurt that I'd kept it secret. My father actually tried to argue that their treatment of me had motivated me to succeed, as if emotional manipulation and constant belittlement were some sort of strategic parenting choice. The most surreal moment came when my father, ever the banker, started asking about my company's valuation and market position. The look on his face when I quoted the numbers was priceless. He had to sit down when he realized that the inheritance they'd fought so hard to keep from me was literally a rounding error compared to what I'd built. But why didn't you tell us? My mother kept asking. We would have been so proud. Would you? I asked quietly. Would you really? Because I remember every single time you dismissed my work as a hobby. Every time you called my projects cute little computer games. Every time you told relatives not to encourage my unrealistic dreams. That shut them up for a moment. But then my father, in typical fashion, tried to spin it. We were just trying to protect you, he insisted. The tech industry is so volatile. I couldn't help but laugh. I pulled up our latest market analysis on my screens, showing how my AI had predicted major market shifts that traditional analysts had missed. You want to talk about volatility, Dad? Let me show you what real financial analysis looks like in the 21st century. 1 week later, well, everything just exploded, and not in the way I expected. My cousin, who apparently follows tech news, recognized me from a recent profile in TechCrunch and told my parents. They showed up unannounced at my office yesterday. I expected anger about the deception. Instead, my mother burst into tears talking about how proud they'd always been of me but didn't want to encourage risky behavior. My father tried to explain that everything they did was to protect me from failure. They even claimed the inheritance situation was meant to motivate me to prove them wrong. Marcus's reaction was the most surprising. He completely broke down, admitting that he'd been struggling under the weight of their expectations for years. He revealed that he hated banking but was too afraid to disappoint our parents. The prodigy image was something he felt forced to maintain. The family dynamic has shifted dramatically. My parents are oscillating between trying to take credit for my success, we pushed you to prove yourself, and apologizing for their past behavior. Marcus has asked for my help in finding a career he actually enjoys, admitting that he's envious of how I followed my passion despite family pressure. I'm proceeding cautiously. While I'm open to helping Marcus transition to a career he genuinely wants, I'm not going to let my parents retroactively rewrite history. I've agreed to family therapy sessions, not to sweep everything under the rug, but to properly address 2 decades of damaged relationships. 1 month later, the shareholders' meeting happened yesterday, and it was quite something. I gave my first public presentation as CEO with my family in the audience. The technology demonstrations left many traditional bankers, including my father, visibly shocked at how outdated their methods had been. Marcus approached me afterward with a surprising proposal. He wants to return his portion of the inheritance to me, saying it should have been split fairly as our grandfather intended. I declined, not out of pride, but because I genuinely don't need it. Instead, we're discussing using it to start a foundation supporting young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. My parents are still adjusting to the new reality, but there's been progress. My father admitted that his resistance to technology had more to do with fear of becoming obsolete than actual business judgment. My mother has stopped trying to manage everyone's lives and is focusing on repairing individual relationships with both her sons. As for me, I'm learning that success is the best revenge, but revenge isn't always as satisfying as growth and reconciliation. Though I'm keeping the framed copy of Marcus's flawed proposal in my office, sometimes a little pettiness is healthy. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories.